to the Front Street Foundation Money Series. This is a series of open access of financial education for everybody. It's a nonprofit organization that's in partnership with Traverse Area District Library as well as the Grand Traverse County Senior Center Network. We do programs about once a month here at the library, and we have a program scheduled in the middle of December. But tonight, we're going to be hearing from Phil Ellis of the Regional Community Foundation here, Grand Traverse Regional Community Foundation. And he's going to be talking about legacy planning, creating a lasting impression, and I'm really excited about the program. There are a few videos in it that I think are going to be especially touching. I think that they're extraordinarily well done, and they tell the story of what legacy giving is all about. To kind of give you a quick background about the Front Street Foundation itself, this is a partnership with the library. The library has been extraordinarily generous in allowing us to come and educate the public on financial topics. And those financial topics range from personal financial planning type topics all the way to things like estate planning or dealing with, we had a program on cottage law, for example, a couple months ago, relating to how you can transfer your cottage through the generations. So it really runs the gamut of financial planning topics. In addition to that, the Senior Center Network has allowed us to be able to do certain programs that are geared towards their constituency and use their space and invite their population to come and learn about financial products or financial topics without any commercial messaging, and I think that that's an important aspect of this money series. You can find all of the recordings of these programs on frontstreetfoundation.org. Within a few days after the end of each program, we rebroadcast these presentations. They're about an hour long, and in addition to that, they are played on channel 189, the open access TV channel from Up North Media. And so you will have an archive available to be able to pass along to family and friends. If the topic is really of interest to you and you know that it's going to be something that's going to help someone else in the community, you can just pass along the link from frontstreetfoundation.org, as well as the website that's accessible through the website and Facebook page, excuse me. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Phil Ellis, who is the Executive Director of the Grand Traverse Community Foundation. And Phil is going to tell you more about himself because I think that people really know about themselves best. So thank you so much very much for contributing.
Thank you very much. So born and raised in Michigan, went to colleges and universities in Indiana, and ended up at that university that you all know and love, the Ohio State University, where I completed my doctoral work. And I am a clinical psychologist by background. So a great question would be, why is a clinical psychologist the executive director of the Community Foundation? And we haven't figured that out yet. So I've been there since 2009. And maybe a little bit about the Community Foundation. Community foundations were started. The first one was in Cleveland in 1914. And they have grown to be around the country and actually around the world. The Grand Traverse Regional Community Foundation was formed in 1992. Next year will be our 25th anniversary. And we serve the 5-county region of Benzie, Leelanau, Grand Traverse, Kalkaska, and Antrim counties. We are about just over 50 million in endowed assets. And what that means is that money has been gifted to us by donors, large and small. And we will have that money in perpetuity, meaning forever, and we will grant somewhere in the neighborhood at this point of $2 to $3 million a year within our 5 counties. And that would be related to education, arts and culture, the environment, youth, seniors, about anything you can think about to support our region. So a topic of leaving a legacy, and a lot of people would say, well, why would we talk about that? That's something, and I'm going to reference this later, but that's something that rich people do. And I may not be a rich person. I, in fact, am not a rich person. But what I want to talk about is legacy, first of all, and then we'll talk about legacy giving. Because in a sense, if you came here thinking that, well, I don't know that I can leave a legacy, you're absolutely wrong. You are leaving a legacy, and we look at a definition like this that talks about what is a legacy, and if you read something like this, then you know that you are leaving a legacy because you are doing something that will be received and is being received by future generations. And let's think about what that is. If you create something solely for the benefit of future generations, here's a quote: "The true meaning of a life is to plant trees under whose shade you do not expect to sit." Have you ever heard that saying before? It was actually, there was a gentleman by the name of Nelson Henderson. Nelson Henderson. Oh, thank you, it's right there. Nelson Henderson and his son, Wesley, wrote a book called The Shade Under Which You'll Not Sit. And he quoted his father. And there was a post recently, 2014, his grandson, Jason Henderson, said, "This was our grandfather's way of saying, don't think too much of yourself. Think about other people." And it's a great quote, and we use it a lot, and it references what we do, and many times we'll not experience this. And I'm going to talk a little bit later about some folks who, in fact, have done that, and they are not around to experience this. This is another quote that I really appreciate, that there are people who came before us who created this, or brought this world that we have, and then we at some point will depart, and we are leaving a world to the next generation. And he talks about it as a calling in our lives. And for me, calling is a pretty high thing. It's not just here's an idea, it's a calling, and we should take it seriously. So who are some of the legacy leavers? It's probably not a good term, but it's what I'll use. Who are some of the legacy leavers that you think about in your life? I've suggested a few here, but there could be many others. And a legacy can be something very positive, but it also could be something negative. Somebody could have impacted your life and left a legacy that isn't all positive. But generally speaking, we like to think on the positive side. And who have they been? So I'm going to tell you two people in my life. My father was born in 1911 in the metropolis of Allegan, Michigan, southwest Michigan, on a farm. His father was a farmer. My dad was blind. He had a disease called retinitis pigmentosa. And my father, when he went to a blind high school in Lansing, after that, he had a rug weaving shop, he had a bicycle repair shop, and World War II came along, and disabled men and women were hired into the factories because the abled men were off to war. So that was a huge break for my family and my father. And he worked in that factory for 30 years, retired when he was 62, as soon as he could, lived to 99, and certainly instilled in me some really positive that sometimes bites me, but the whole sense of, if my father could do this and he was blind, is there something I can't do? So that was a legacy, one of many, that he left me. My mother was born a year later, same town. Her parents were farmers as well. As a matter of fact, her father didn't work outside of the farm, raised food for them as well as selling to be able to survive. A few years before my father passed, actually 2 years before my father passed, we did a video of him, and I asked him questions, he told me stories. My mother wrote a little bit about her life before she passed away. I have those for my kids, and I have them for my two granddaughters, because I'm guessing that they could not imagine what it would be like to live in 1911 and 1912. So the world has changed just a bit since that time. They are probably the most significant legacy leavers for me. And as you think about who are your legacy leavers? You might think about people like that as well. So there was a study that looked at what they referred to as the pillars of legacy. And they came up with 4. So the first one was values and life lessons. I just kind of talked about that in a way. Second one being instructions and wishes to be fulfilled, kind of directions. The third was possessions of emotional value. And the last one was, in a sense, of financial value, money and property. So I already highlighted, so I won't even ask you the question, what was most important? It's not money. A lot of people think, well, money is the most important we can leave. It's not at all. It's values and life lessons. So the reason I share this with you is back to my point that we all leave a legacy. It's not something that can only be done by a few people. We all do it. And when we think about at the Community Foundation, we ask the question, what do you love? What do you care about? What's important to you? And when you think about those things, we want you to begin to think about what can you do about that beyond your lifetime. And this is probably not going to come as a surprise. And the next thing I'm going to say is the number one reason why Jason will not invite me back to speak. We're all going to die. So if that comes as a surprise to you, I'm sorry, but it's true. And some of us, it's closer than others, but it is a truism. It's not something we can escape, but it is something that we know that we can have some impact beyond our lifetime. So the idea of legacy giving, I want you to think about it in 2 ways. As a noun, it's the idea of the creation of a future gift to exist beyond our lifetime. And as a noun, it's a foresighted action. It's a purposeful action that we make. Now, when I die, there are 3 options where my estate will go. And when we use legacy and estate, those sound like pretty big things, but they don't have to be. Legacy, we've already talked about. An estate is anything that you leave at your passing. It could be china, it could be a bicycle, it could be something. We're all going to leave something behind unless we've figured out how to give everything away 10 minutes before we pass or something like that. So a foresighted action that conveys our values. Does that make sense, I hope? So here are a couple of things that we know. Nearly 70% of Americans make charitable gifts during their lifetime. And yet, less than 10% do any kind of legacy gift. And let's think about that another way. Here is a study done by Russell James at the University of Georgia. Study tracked 20,000 Americans over the age of 50 from 95 to 06. Of people who donated $500 a year or more to charity, again, 9.5% had charitable estate plans. So go back to my point of we're all going to pass at some point, and I think there are not more than seriously 3 options where my estate is going to go, however meager or however substantial. It can go to family or friends, and we can talk about, I'm not a tax expert at all. I'm not an attorney. I happen to have a daughter who's one, but that doesn't do anything for me. But there are certainly tax benefits and issues related to that. Second, so family or friends. Second one is to a charitable organization or purpose. And the third one is that yawning, sucking sound, the government. And the government would love to take our estates. And if we don't plan, that's exactly what happens. So it's important, and if nothing else, this evening when you walk away, I hope that you are willing to begin thinking about what is it that what do you love, what do you care about, and is there anything that you might be able to do to carry that on as a legacy? So why don't people, if 70% of people give, and of the people that give at least $500 a year, only 9.5% do any legacy planning. Why not? So it's only for wealthy people. That's what people think. And it's not true. It's confusing. I don't know how to do this. And we'll talk a little bit about, in fact, how easy this is to do. But when we use estate, legacy, words like that, it's like, well, how do I do something like that? It's going to be really expensive. I'm going to have to pay a lot of attorney fees. I'm not going to argue that one necessarily. It may cost, but the fact is that the benefit in the long term is going to outweigh what you need to pay. I might need my money. Never, ever do I talk to folks about some type of gift that isn't beyond what they need to live. Now, how much will you need to live? How much will I need to live? I don't know. It depends on how long I live and how I'm going to live and so forth. So what we're talking about today is beyond what we need to live. And at the Community Foundation, we're typically talking about an afterlife gift, at end-of-life gift. Number one reason people don't give an estate or a planned gift, nobody ever asked them. Nobody ever asked them at all. And especially nobody ever asked them and helped them understand how doable this is. So let me tell you about my introduction to legacy giving. I told you before I'm a clinical psychologist by background. Spent most of my career in a psychiatric hospital, employed in this case. But eventually I ran the hospital side of this organization and came to the point where I don't want to do this anymore. And the CEO of the whole system said, rather than leaving, why don't you come run our foundation? So I did that for 3.5 years before I moved up here. And early on, I came across this in a trade journal. And it might be a little hard for you to read, but basically pet groomer Jenny Baxter died in 1972. At 5 p.m. today, she'll feed 50 stray dogs. And I thought, what? How does that work? Well, this is out of the Leave a Legacy. It's a publicity kind of thing. And you can see it's for review only, so it's not an official poster. But this was the first time I thought, how cool would it be that 20 or 30 years later, what I loved and I care about, I could still be doing. That got my attention. And of course I thought, well, I probably can't do that. Here's another one that caught my attention. So Bob was baptized in his church. Bob got married in his church. Bob brought his children to the church. He was a choir boy in the church. His whole life, he was in the church, but when he died, he left $1 million to his school. Again, why? The church never asked him. The church never let him know that that was an option. But trust me, if you've been to a college or a university, they'll let you know about it on a very regular basis. And again, I thought, Bob, I mean, this life here tells me Bob loved his church. It was a very critical part of his life. But at the end of his life, nothing but a school that maybe he went to for 4 years and went back for football games or something, got a big, maybe all of his estate. Mac and Lois McClure. I'm going to tell you stories. That's the best way to tell this, is to tell stories. Mac and Lois McClure, they lived in Vermont, I believe, and Mac gave a speech at the Vermont Community Foundation. This was quite a few years ago. Mac was a newspaper man, eventually sold his paper to Gannett, and then was a big wig with them, retired early, like in his 50s, and became a philanthropist. And he tells this story about someone else who shared this with him, the idea of warm hands and cold hands. And he talked about the idea that when we're living, we can give with our warm hands. But someday, our hands will become cold. And I don't have to paint a picture of what we mean by that. But then he said, but there's another set of warm hands beyond your cold hands who can carry on what your warm hands were doing. And his point back then was with this foundation in Vermont. So warm hands, cold hands, and yet warm hands that someone beyond your lifetime will carry out your wishes and what you care about and what you want done. So I'm going to tell you about some folks closer to home. Edith Krause. Edith Krause lived here. She lived out her life, at the end of her life, at Hope Village. During her lifetime, she cared very much about especially women who were abused and mistreated. And as part of her estate, she left a gift to the Community Foundation to support women who are experiencing domestic violence. And every year, Edith, although she died a number of years ago, 2012, every year Edith gives a gift to the Women's Resource Center here in town through an endowment at the Community Foundation. Edith is gone, but her wish, her desire, her legacy continues. Carolina Holtree. Carolina died in 2000. Her daughter, Carolyn, died the year before. The combined estate was directed to benefit the Benzie Shores District Library, the Maples in Frankfort, and the Frankfort, Alberta schools. So every year the Community Foundation makes a grant to each of those organizations in the name of Carolina Holtree. Cleo Purdy, you might have read about this one. Cleo Purdy was born and raised in Central Lake, a little village in northern Antrim County. She wanted to stay after high school and work on the farm, and her dad said, nope, get out of here. So she joined the Army. She eventually became a teacher, was a special ed teacher. She never married, never had children. She started buying real estate in in Santa Barbara. And at the end of her life, she left an estate that benefited not only Santa Barbara, but 90% of it came back to benefit our region for early childhood in Central Lake, Michigan. Gordon Brown. Gordon Brown and his wife Susan were regular donors to Inland Seas. They cared about, he was a sailor, boating, and they loved what Inland Seas did for education of kids. Gordon passed away a few years ago, left the gift to the Community Foundation, and every year the Gordon V. Brown Memorial Endowment makes a grant to Inland Seas. Got a pattern going here. Robert Hansen, Robert A. Hansen, whose son Chip is a dear friend of mine. Mr. Hansen was worked in a factory in Mansalona. He worked in that factory for 42 years, but he was also a great athlete in college and was drafted by the Chicago Cubs, was a contract to go to Green Bay to play in a minor league team, but he, at that point, had a young family and said, I'm not going to do that. My family, there's another legacy. That was more important to him. He eventually was on the school board. He coached and so forth. He became ill with cancer at age 60, and at age 62 passed away. Every year, Robert A. Hansen Sr., through the Community Foundation, helps send a kid, an athlete scholarship winner, to college. I mentioned his son Chip, Robert A. Hansen Jr., who's my counterpart. He's head of the Charlevoix Community Foundation. And one of the things I didn't say to you is every county in Michigan is covered by a community foundation to do exactly this kind of work. So I want to talk to you a little bit about Larry and Joan Miller. Larry was a dear friend. He served on our board for about a dozen years. Larry, I'm going to let Larry tell his own story. So, Jason, please.
So we came up here in the fall of '71, didn't know a soul, nobody, and bought a failing business and made it work.
It's a wonderful little community, and people just were so welcoming.
From day one, the community accepted us. With the type of business I had, being a petroleum distributor, you're in people's homes and businesses and farms in every possible way of life. So you become instantly visible. We started being solicited for charitable projects, for the schools, for fundraising, and we didn't have any money to give. I mean, we had such massive debt with the business that we just had to adopt a policy of no to everybody. But we wanted to give back in some way, so we started giving of ourselves. All these years we've been volunteers and not done a lot financially. But we said, within our means, what can we do?
We started talking about it, and we started talking about the institutions or whatever that we would like to support in the years ahead.
The Community Foundation had kind of an anniversary dinner or celebration at their country club and talked about planned giving. And I think that's the first time I heard "Where Your Wish Lives Forever." And I knew what a great organization they were, how well managed it was, and I guess one of the key words with me is how prudent the investors were. We wanted to give a legacy that lasted forever. When I pass away, if there's a service for me or whatever, I want people to think, there's a guy that cared about his community.
As you could see in this, that was wintertime when that was taken, and in Larry and Joan's home. And before summer was out, Larry was gone. I spent time with him when he became ill and through his struggle. And I was at the service where people said good things about him, exactly what he referenced there. And the Larry and Joan Miller Endowment supports the Paul Oliver Memorial Hospital, the Art Center in Frankfort, Benzie Area Christian Neighbors, and I better not say the fourth one because I'm not exactly sure right now, but it is doing exactly what Larry and Joan wanted it to do. Here's a quote about the whole idea of the shortness of the time that we're here and the opportunities we have of changing humanity for the better. I was meeting with a gentleman today. We were talking over lunch about the idea of transformational philanthropy, the idea of how can we have an impact on our region to make it a better place for our kids and our grandkids than what it is now. How do we do what other people did for us to help us with our life and to be able to pass that on? So what are we talking about? What is planned giving? What is legacy giving? The idea here is a transfer of assets to a designated IRS exempt organization. Now, what does that mean? An IRS exempt organization is a 501c3 charitable organization recognized, so it's pretty much any of the not-for-profits that you think about in the region. It's a college or university, it's a church, could even be a governmental entity for a purpose. And the idea here is that it's a gift made during our lifetime or as part of our estate plan. I am unlikely to ever make a major gift in my lifetime. I just don't have the means to do it. Do I give regularly? Absolutely. But I know that the largest gift I'm ever going to give is going to be at the end of my life. That's, I wish it could be otherwise, but that's the way it's going to be. And so when I talk about an estate plan, I have an estate plan, and I have a gift in my plan to the Community Foundation, because there are things that I care about that I would like to have my name attached to for generations to come. And that will keep me alive forever. Not literally, but So who does this? So one of the things that we often think about is, well, this is for wealthy people. No question, Bill and Melinda Gates are very capable of making an estate gift, but they're planning on spending it down. I mean, that's their goal, to spend it down. But we often think of people, and I'm going to go back to my dad for a moment. I took my dad to the car dealership. See, this was back when you bought things with cash. You didn't have credit cards, didn't even have a checking account. I remember the insurance man coming over and my dad sitting at the table counting out the money for our insurance. And some of you may remember those kinds of things. I took my dad to a car dealership. Remember, he couldn't drive, he was blind. Thank goodness he didn't drive. But I took him to the car dealership and he had cash in his pocket to buy a car. But my dad was blind. He was in his work clothes, and we couldn't get anybody to wait on us. So he didn't buy his car there. He went somewhere else and bought a car. So my point in that is we often look at people and say, oh, they've got lots. And oftentimes, the people that look like they have the most are spending their money to make it look like they have the most. But in fact, there's a great old book called The Millionaire Next Door. And it's true that some of the most significant and meaningful gifts are given by retired school teachers, retired janitors, retired factory workers, retired college professors, people who, frankly, lived in a way that created an estate while other people were spending their estate. So it also, one of the things we know is that family needs trump legacy giving. Back to what I said before, I would never encourage someone to think about this if they have family or close friends or whatever who have need and some or all of their estate could help them. Family, friends, trump about anything. Another thing is that one of the things we know is that couples or individuals without children are more likely to leave a legacy, if you will. And part of that is we've taken some folks out of the equation that I said, here's who we tend to leave money for. And I would also say that we know, whether it's our nephews or our kids or our grandkids, leaving money can be a good thing and it can be a bad thing. There are some silver spoon kids around who never learned values, never learned some of the core elements of life because it was all handed to them. And so there's a balance between I fully expect to leave some money at the end of my life to help my kids and my granddaughters. I have two kids. One has probably greater need and will in the long run, and I've already had this discussion with my kids. It's not going to be equal. It's going to be based on need. And what I don't think they need, they're not going to get. So I also think that one of the greatest worries that philanthropists and people who make gifts have is what's going to happen? How is my gift going to be used? How can I be assured that what I'm giving for will actually be realized? Because after my life, I'm gone. I can't control this from the grave. But in fact, we can. When we make a designated gift, an estate gift, with the right organization, there are rules, there are laws in place to make sure that that's realized and carried out. I can't ever watch this Larry and Joan Miller video without my heart being touched by the many times that I've sat and talked with Larry and been in Larry and Joan's living room. I feel that way about Edith Krauss, and I never met her. I feel that way about Gordon Brown, never met him. That way about Bob Hansen, never met him. And on and on and on. We, and my board chair is here tonight, we have a responsibility to carry out donors' wishes. And Larry referenced the term where a donor's wish lives forever. That was a hash line, for a tagline for us. And we believe in that, and it's critical. So I want to go back to, I said, okay, one of the things we might worry about is how expensive this is. But generally speaking, there's someone out there that we trust with financial management of our money. I do not go home at the end of the day, get on my computer, and make trades of stocks, bonds, and so forth. I also have a financial planner who helps me think through what am I going to need in life. There are professionals out there, estate planning attorneys, wealth managers, certified public accountants, and people at not-for-profit organizations, including the Community Foundation, that can help us think through those things. And so I highly encourage people to do that. And if it costs me a bit of money to have my will and my trust done right so that my wishes, in fact, are going to be carried out, we highly recommend that. And I'm going to give you an example of, this isn't a pitch for this particular attorney at all, so please don't take it that way, but share with you a story about one of our gifts, a gentleman by the name of Ernie Isaacson.
Ernie Isaacson was a neat guy. He wanted to provide a scholarship for academically achieving students with a financial need in the area. And he was able to do that through the Community Foundation. I do a little bit of everything related to estate planning, trust administration, probate administration, creation of trusts, writing wills, powers of attorney, along those lines. We started looking at the foundation because to do this with other vehicles, be it a charitable trust or a family foundation, was cost prohibitive. The Community Foundation does a great job of explaining to clients where the money goes, what the costs are, so if they're making a donation, how much of that donation is going to administrative costs, where the dollars go. They've done a great job explaining that to my clients, and my clients like that. It provided the most bang for the buck because we weren't spending thousands of dollars each year on overhead. That's money that we could actually put back into the community and provide an extra scholarship. I've sat on the grant making committee, the scholarship making committee, and I see that we were able to give out extra scholarships this year because we had money available to do that. So it's stretching the dollar and stretching Ernie's legacy, stretching Ernie's gift just a little bit farther, and that makes all the difference. One of the really neat things that I found in working with the Community Foundation was the level of care that the staff took to learn about Ernie. They didn't want to leave any stone unturned, and I know Ernie would have appreciated that. But I've seen the gift created, and now I'm actually seeing how it's applied, and it's just tremendously rewarding. When we talk about, well, how would Ernie look at this application? And as we get into it, we start talking about that and talking about what Ernie was like. It's like Ernie's in the room with us, helping us make these decisions. This gift is meant to last forever, and in 100 years, by doing that homework initially, in 100 years, I know that his goals and his intent will continue to live on because that groundwork was laid when the fund was set up. So I tell any planner, any professional, just pick up the phone and call and see what the Community Foundation has to offer.
So I mentioned before that there's a community foundation in every county in Michigan. So we try to be careful that we're not like pitching something. One of the things I mentioned earlier that we have $50 million in endowed assets at the Community Foundation. So one of the nice things about us is we don't need anybody's money. We're not out asking for anybody's money, because what we do is we serve donors. And what we get to do is we get to sit down and say, what is it that you love, that you care about, and how can we help you do that? And if we can't, We won't. I had a couple come to me a number of years ago. They were getting married. They had both lost a spouse, and they had found each other, and they were getting married, and they were going to raise some money at their wedding that they wanted to be able to help other people who had experienced loss like they had. And we sat down and talked about it, and I said, well, how much do you anticipate raising? And it was a certain amount, and I said, you know, we're really here for gifts that provide something in perpetuity, in forever. And it sounds like what you're looking for is to help somebody right now. And they said, well, yeah, that's what we're doing. I said, there's a wonderful organization by the name of Michael's Place that does exactly what you're talking about right here in town. They do grief counseling, they do grief groups, they help address exactly the problem that you're talking about, hook them up, and they were as happy as could be. And so that's one of the things that we have the joy of being able to help people. I have sat with, unfortunately, but fortunately, with so many folks who have lost someone in their life, especially a young person, and want to do something that will create a legacy in their name, whether it's a scholarship or, you know, we have the Joe Bryson fund. We also have a fund that benefits environmental concerns in Benzie County that is a result of a young man who was killed in an auto accident, and yet he's gone, but every year in his name there's a grant made. So those are moments that you sit with someone and it's just heartbreaking, and yet that person or that couple for years later get to see that that memory is still alive and still having an impact. So we talk about the idea of what will you be doing in 100 years. And I remember the first time we said this, somebody just laughed and said, I'll be dead. Yes, but our point is, what do you love? What do you care about? What do you want to have your name attached to? What impact do you want to have 100 years from now, 200 years from now? Trust me, we have no idea what life is going to be like. When I think about from the time my father was born in 1911 to the world today, I couldn't have imagined that amount of change, and yet there's data that tells us that change is coming at an ever-increasing clip. One of the things at the Community Foundation that we have the opportunity to do is to repurpose or redirect when there is a need to do that. We have an endowment that's called the Boys and Girls Club Endowment. There used to be a Boys and Girls Club here. There's no longer a Boys and Girls Club, but there are people that gave their gifts for that Boys and Girls Club endowment. So the mission of a Boys and Girls Club is typically to provide after-school programming for at-risk youth. So we still have the Boys and Girls Club endowment, and it provides grants to organizations that provide after-school programs for at-risk youth. We have a number of funds like that that the organization no longer exists. And trust me, we may think an organization is as solid as can be and will always exist, but 100 years from now, probably not. And yet, the role of the Community Foundation is to make sure whatever the donor's intention was is realized. So when I think about what am I going to be doing in 100 years, I know some things that I'm going to be doing, and the Community Foundation is going to be doing that for me.
We all know the Pay It Forward concept. You make a simple gesture in hopes that the chain of kindness continues. But think what can happen when we apply that idea to giving on a community level.
I give back as a way to feel part of the community.
I give back because really it started as a kid in my early family culture.
The reason I give forward is because I am a beneficiary of those who were ahead of me and were very generous.
What if we give it forward in a way that continues to multiply well beyond our years, creating sustainable gifts that continue to enrich, support, and brighten our communities for generations to come?
I think the thing I like the most about it is the idea of a legacy gift, that you might give $1 today and it's going to impact the the people in the place that you care about forever. Not just that fiscal year, not just that calendar year, but forever. There's no other way to give that has that kind of an impact.
Now align that giving with what you treasure most. Arts and culture, education, health and human services, youth, the environment, whatever your passion is, that giving becomes meaningful.
Take a stroll down our main street or go to our hospital facility or go to an exhibit at our art center. You know, what you're seeing is the impact that's being made by the Grand Traverse Regional Community Foundation.
It's staying here. It's not going someplace else. And you can be very proud of where your dollars go.
There's an amazing amount of heart in this community and throughout the 5-county region. There's no sector of the region the Community Foundation doesn't touch.
The diversity of giving opportunity is really unique to the Community Foundation.
As a community, when we work together to create sensible, sustainable, heartfelt giving opportunities, great things continue to happen, bettering lives in our region forever.
I'm a former scholarship recipient from the Community Foundation. It's something that meant a lot to me and my family. Thank you to everyone who's a part of the Community Foundation that may have made a gift or continues to make gifts to support people like me who went away for a while but came back very proud to serve in Northern Michigan.
To take the opportunity to really thank all of the donors that have helped preserve our community today, but also allowing us to further commit to our enhancement towards the future.
Thank you for everyone who's given today to ensure the vibrancy of our communities for the future.
And with that, I truly want to thank Phil for doing this program. I can tell you, just being an audience member and attendee of watching what you guys do, the Community Foundation is an amazing asset of our region, and it's really largely due to the work that you do and as well as your colleagues. So thank you very much. I also want to thank a couple of partners here, the Traverse Area District Library, which has really been generous to allow us to use the space and the technology investment that they've made to allow this to be recorded and broadcast throughout the community. So the library has been wonderful. In addition to that, the Senior Center Network really serves a wonderful population of people in our area and provides education, and I'm happy that the Money Series is a partner with the Senior Center Network. And finally, to have Up North Media as an asset of our community to allow for the dissemination of education like this is truly wonderful. And I hope that people are able to go on to Channel 189 and watch many programs, not only Money Series, but various other community programs as well as government TV. I think you can learn a lot. And Up North Media has been wonderful as well. So with that, we're going to move on to a Q&A session regarding